The open negotiation period of the NFL free agency kicked off this morning at 9 o'clock. The 49ers have been busy. We're going to tell you all about what the signing of Javon Hargrave really says about the 49ers next on Inside the Fires with Jack Hammer and Rob Shue. If I Hey everybody, it is Monday night, which means it is time for the Hammerhead Show. I'm Jack Hammer, my partner in crime, Rob Shue. We're finally back together. It's been a while. Inside the Fires with Jack Hammer, a little bit of rebranding there, but this is the Hammerhead Show where we get down to talking 49ers football every Monday night. Rob, how you doing?
I am doing very well. Here we are. The offseason is in full swing now that we are into free agency. I feel like that's really the point where it kicks off. Certainly the combine is fascinating and attending it was something last year, but when moves start to happen, that's where the excitement is ratcheted up a notch. And so that's where I am, smiling ear to ear, ready for more news. Every day is going to come with additional signings. Very excited, Jack.
No, I agree with you. It's a great time of the year because, hope springs eternal at this point, and everything's a good signing. Everything's good. Everything's, every once in a while you can say that something's not so good. That gets everybody all fired up too. But for the most part right now, everybody's excited. You have a lot of good deals that are going down for the 49ers. And one of the things for me is it shows how nice it is that this team's been playing so late into the season, 2 years in a row. And we've gone through, only had about a month and a half where we've had to kill time before the fun starts up again. So that's one of the cool parts about this.
Absolutely. It's great to continually have a shorter period of rest in between the end of the season and when the excitement kicks off.
Absolutely. And real quick, before we get going with some of the topics, I want to shout out Lucas Pesce. He's a member of the Toolbox from Austria. He says, "Hey, Jack and Rob, what an exciting day it is. It's been a good one." And then I like this one from Luke Walsh. He says, "Happy LTD Day, Legal Tampering Day." That's perfect. We got a couple of days of legal tampering today and tomorrow. Tom Bragg says, "Hi, Jack and Rob. Great signing for our Niners to replace the useless Kinlaw." We're going to get it all into that one in a minute. Maybe not so much on Javon Kinlaw, but some other things with the 49ers. KW2421, I think more fans are excited by the exit of McGlinchey than the signing of Hargrave. I don't know about that one. And then Kevin says, "Evening, guys. What a day. Jimmy Garoppolo off, finally. Mike McGlinchey away and Kinlaw on the line. Getting Hargrave is huge. Darnold is kind of meh, but could be worse." Well, we're going to talk about the Sam Darnold edition as well, but let's kick it off. The morning was barely even getting started. It was early. I barely was finishing my coffee when the 49ers news came across the wire that the 49ers had struck a deal with Javon Hargrave, the Philadelphia Eagles defensive tackle, 4 years, $84 million with $40 million guaranteed. What are your thoughts, Rob?
First and foremost, I was not expecting the 49ers to come in and make that type of a splash right off of the bat. That was not my prediction coming into this period. And for the second year in a row, I was pleasantly surprised in that regard. Last year, coming out swinging, attacking what you could argue was the biggest weakness in the defense, grabbing Charvarius Ward in free agency. And this time around, during our legal tampering window, it's such an awkward name. It's like an oxymoron, legal tampering. But yes, we come in and swoop up the best defensive player available, and I would argue the best defensive tackle available by a wide margin. And I saw that as again, the biggest need for the 49ers. So quite surprised that we came out swinging yet again. It gives you optimism. 49ers pushing a lot of chips into the center of the table. I mean, you come into free agency, a lot of people are talking about where the Niners are up against the cap, a lot of the big contracts that still need to get doled out. Obviously, the Bosa deal needs to get done. You're going to have Brandon Ayuk on the horizon. And yet, here they go, adding to the defense, attacking that weakness that makes this line formidable once again.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by this, and we'll get into some of the reasons why I was a little bit surprised by it, but it's a good move. Javon Hargrave has been extremely what would you say, productive, especially over the last 4 years. This is a guy who you pair Javon Hargrave in the middle with Eric Armstead, and now all of a sudden you have two monsters in the middle. Who's gonna block Nick Bosa? And then we'll find out what the Flyers do over at the other side. Is it going to be Drake Jackson? Is that who they're going to trust, or are they going to bring somebody in to fill that other side? But Hargrave should open up things across the line of scrimmage for the pass rush. And then the other thing with it too, this is a guy who's played over 700 snaps in the last 2 seasons. So there's you look at him and Eric Armstead. Armstead, other than this past year when he was dealing with injuries, he's been in that same boat as well. Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave, Nick Bosa, those 3 defensive linemen for the 49ers that could play over almost 70% of the snaps for him this year.
It's fantastic. When you look at the production of everyone not named Eric Armstead, I'm going to thank David Lombardi for putting this out on Twitter, as I'm stealing it right here, but giving credit where credit is due. The 8 DTs not named Eric Armstead generated 59 pressures, whereas Javon Hargrave 66 himself. So more productive than all of the 49ers defensive tackles not named Eric Armstead. And players throughout the league, you see actual NFL players reacting to it as well. I love Micah Parsons' tweet. He throws out incorrectly spelling Eric Armstead's name, E-R-I-K, which is going up on the bulletin board for Eric Armstead. But he comes out to say something along the lines of, oh, wow, Bosa, Javon, and Eric, damn, misspelling damn as well. Not that I'm the spelling police here, but Mike is a cow. I got to be harsh on him, Jack. So, yeah, when I look at Bosa, Hargrave, and Eric Armstead together, whomever that fourth player is, whether it is in those NASCAR packages where you're bringing in the second-year player and Drake Jackson, and he's now paired with an elite 3 along the defensive line, or you go out and you sign a less expensive edge who remains one of those veteran names that's still going to be out there. You see someone like a Calais Campbell getting released today. There will be names like that throughout the remainder of free agency that are exploring potential fits, signing 1-year deals, short-term deals, team-friendly deals, and those are often going to be with teams that present them unique opportunities. Most often a chance to win a championship, which the 49ers fall in that category. But also if you're surrounded by enough talent that it's going to allow you to shine as an individual as well, that can be enticing. And certainly you could argue that there's no better setup for that fourth player to walk into as an edge than being paired with those 3. So it's very exciting for what it does for this defense. Feels like it takes us back to sort of 2019, wherein we did have Buckner there holding it down in the middle alongside Eric Armstead. So this to me was, again, unexpected, but a huge move. And I thought it addressed the biggest need for the Niners. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the biggest need. Well, I shouldn't say I don't know if it was the biggest need, because they'd already. I thought their biggest need was at safety, and they addressed that a little earlier. They didn't get a big name to do it, but they addressed it. They have somebody there. I think their plan is probably to get younger at that position during the draft. You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned DeForest Buckner, and one of the things about that's very interesting that you mentioned was the tweet about how DeForest, what was it, 66 total pressures for Javon Hargrave last season, and compared that to the rest of the 49ers. What's interesting about that is if you look back over the last, since 2019, the 49ers haven't had anybody come close to it. Actually, DeForest Buckner in 2019, you want to know how many total pressures he put together?
Yes, please.
66. The same number as Javon Hargrave, 66 total pressures by DeForest Buckner in 2019. And I'm going to let's go ahead and just talk about this really quick. And this is where I have a couple of different theories on this. I want to get into this one. What the signing of Javon Hargrave really means with the 49ers. What it's really saying about the 49ers. And there's I have 2 of them. We're going to start off with this one though first, because you already mentioned it with DeForest Buckner. I think what this says is that the 49ers realized that they screwed up and they made a mistake by not doing a deal with DeForest Buckner. You look at this, DeForest Buckner signed it. What did DeForest Buckner sign? Oh, that's right. 4 years, $84 million, which everybody at the time said was way too much money. There was no way that he deserved that kind of money. Never mind the fact that he was an all-pro the first year that he wasn't with the 49ers. Never mind the fact that he's put up big numbers every year since then. But 4 years, $84 million was too much. One last thing on this. If they had kept DeForest Buckner, he'd still be under contract for the 49ers. he'd be cheaper over the course of that 5-year period than what the 49ers are going to pay for Javon Hargrave, because he still had a year left on his deal. It would have been he had a $12 million remaining on his rookie deal because of they'd chosen to use the 5th-year option.
Right.
So in reality, if they'd given DeForest Buckner a 4-year, $84 million deal back in 2020, the 49ers would have had a player at 5 years, $96 million. Lower average per year deal than what they're going to pay for Javon Hargrave here.
It's wild. And I do think that you're right about that. I in witnessing what transpired, that trade, I'm sure seemed like a good idea at the time. But in hindsight, John Lynch and company looking back at letting DeForest Buckner go, shipping DeForest Buckner out, I do think that you have to look at that as a mistake. Had we that depth, could we have gotten over the cusp in the last couple of years? Yeah, I think potentially we could have. You haven't gotten out of Javon Kinlaw what you would hope, and maybe he continues to take that next step. You know, he's got one more year to prove it, but certainly you can make a very cogent argument that he has not been capable of filling in for DeForest Buckner. This feels like the replacement of trying to unwind that and say, you know, that was what unlocked the potential within our defensive front in 2019. The other component being a complementary edge. But again, once you have those three locked down at the first three positions, I think adding someone at the fourth or allowing Drake Jackson to grow into his role is so much easier. But it does feel like, hey, we made the mistake with letting Buckner go, with shipping Buckner out, and now we're going to remedy that. And again, it fills a need for the 49ers, and it was a big swing, which to me says, hey, we are in the meat of this Super Bowl era where we believe we have a legitimate shot, and we're not going to waste these years.
Yeah. And they're right there. And this puts that defensive front very similar position to what they were in 2019. Those two really good interior guys with Bosa on the outside. And I think that they see Drake Jackson really as that speed rusher, kind of in the line of what D Ford gave them. I do want to hit on this one really quick from Steve-O Supremo, who says, no Ayuk with Buckner. Well, you're right. If the 49ers had held on to DeForest Buckner, they don't have the 13th pick in the draft, which means that they don't trade back with Tampa Bay and move up to 31 to get Brandon Ayuk. So who knows if Brandon Ayuk would have been there. I'll tell you this, though. If you miss out on Brandon Ayuk, guess who was there 2 spots after? It would have been there for the 49ers in their original draft spot. T. Higgins. Has anybody heard of T. Higgins, the wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals? The guy's putting up huge numbers in Cincinnati. I mean, I like Brandon Ayuk. I think he's a terrific 49er. I don't think there's a drop-off if you don't have Brandon Ayuk and you have T. Higgins instead.
Yeah, that's not a bad argument. And you just never know who's going to be available. If we don't take him there, does he still go in that same range? Or were we more infatuated with him than other teams, and therefore he would have been available when we next picked?
Yeah. So that's just one I wanted to hit on real quick, because that is something that I hear quite a bit when we talk about, or when I've talked about the fact that the 49ers should have held on to DeForest Buckner, that they could have made it work if they wanted to. The argument is always, well, you couldn't keep everybody. You wouldn't have been able to re-sign all these guys. And to that, I always say that's not correct. The way that the salary cap only matters to one group, and that's the team. And all the salary cap really is an accounting mechanism. They can move money around and put it in different spots. It doesn't affect the player. The player wants his money, obviously, right? But when you look at the salary cap as a whole, the salary cap number that a player has their name attached to their name, like, for example, Jimmy Garoppolo, let's say his salary cap hit was $8 million this year, just throwing a number out there. Well, that doesn't mean that he was paid $8 million. He could have made actually $23 million based on signing, all kinds of different things, right? So in this situation, it's never really sat well with me. I thought they made a mistake there. And, we'll see what the numbers are for Hargrave. The one piece that's interesting here is it's only $40 million guaranteed over a 4-year term. That's the big number to keep a look at, keep an eye on. So we'll see what this contract actually looks like. I would expect it to have low numbers in the beginning, higher towards the end. Most of it going to be base salary, though.
It will be interesting to see how far backloaded it is, given the age, right? I mean, he did just turn 30, and so at the tail end of this deal, he'll be 34. Will that dissuade the 49ers from doing the same backloading? Probably not, because for cap gymnastics, that is generally the preferred method, is to kick the can down the road because the cap is continually going up. But I do have to just comment on it. I feel like it is it is the chances of having two defensive tackles named Javon is slim, and the 49ers have accomplished that. So check that box as far as a win.
There you go. So we'll see how this plays out. You mentioned the some of the different things that are going on there, Javon Kinlaw and so on. I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. Go ahead.
Do you think that this helps Javon Kinlaw in potentially having a more impactful season, going back to being a rotational player where he can come in fresh? He's not going to be the starter, not getting quite as many reps, probably less likely to aggravate the knee in doing so. Is this potentially a win for Javon Kinlaw, even though it sets him back?
I think it's a good deal for Javon Kinlaw. He's in the last year of his contract. I think this could help him out by just making him a rotational piece, making it so that he's not expected to be a big player in the 49ers defense. He's a guy who just has struggled at this point. There's some things I like about his game. Maybe he becomes a guy as a rotational piece. All of a sudden he looks better, and we'll see how that all plays out. The 49ers may even trade him down the road. I don't think they're going to trade him right away, but he might be a trade piece later on. Doing it now doesn't really make sense. It would have to be after June 1st, but who knows whether they go with what direction they go with Javon Kinlaw here.
Right. It won't be a cut because that doesn't save the 49ers, but agreed, could become a piece in a trade deal or could become that rotational player.
Yeah. And then, another piece of, I talking about this with regards to Javon Kinlaw or Javon Hargrave, excuse me, bad football there, Javon Hargrave and DeForest Buckner. I was looking at this, and I think that this also says something about Trey Lance too, or it could say something about where the 49ers are with Trey Lance. You start to look at the numbers. Javon Hargrave, 4 years, $84 million. Maybe part of the reason they can afford Javon Hargrave now, where they couldn't afford DeForest Buckner back in 2019 or 2020, excuse me, is because of the quarterback position. And in particular here, I think that this might be a signal that the 49ers believe that Brock Purdy and his surgery went well, and that he's going to be ready, and he's going to be able to step in and be the long-term solution for the 49ers at quarterback. You look at the numbers right now, Trey Lance is going to cost the 49ers $9.3 million against the cap. There's nothing they can really do about it. Brock Purdy, over the next 3 years, is going to cost them just over $3 million, or right around that number. The highest his cap head ever gets is $1.12 million, and that's in the fourth year of his contract. How do you see this possibly impacting Trey Lance? Do you think that maybe it means that at some point here, Trey Lance is going to get traded?
I think it's possible. I don't believe that the 49ers will decide on that too quickly. I still believe that Trey Lance has the ability to prove that he is who we thought he was when the 49ers selected him at 3. And I think the 49ers are still in that boat that, yes, you could trade him away. There might be some GM out there that still has held on to the hope of potential. But unless you allow Trey the opportunity to flash more of that, the return that you get isn't all that much. It is, however, even with Trey involved, a very cost-controlled quarterback room in its totality. So it does speak to me to how the 49ers feel about the health of Brock Purdy. I'm not quite as convinced as it being a hint in moving on from Trey, but I will definitively say that is potentially the case for the 49ers. If you decide that Brock Purdy is the long-term answer and you can recoup something for Trey Lance along the way before he gets to that second contract, that does make sense because you don't want to get to free agency wherein I would guess that Trey Lance is going to be after a starting quarterback job, at least the opportunity for one. And if Brock has firmly entrenched himself at that point, then he's probably not going to favor the 49ers in free agency. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a trade before the end of the contract for Trey Lance, but I would wait and see what we have with both quarterbacks. Obviously, Brock showed a lot last year, but it would be great to confirm that before you ship off your other young quarterback. But even with both in the room, it is a very cost-controlled quarterback room relative to any other team that's paying just a single quarterback $20 million or more per year.
Yeah, and the other thing to kind of throw into this, and maybe it's not even a Javon Hargrave thing, maybe it's a Sam Darnold thing. The 49ers going out and getting Sam Darnold. Darnold's, he hasn't been successful in his career. When you look back, he was, I shouldn't say he hasn't been successful. He's had some moments, right? You go back and you look at his time. He was 7-6 a few years ago with the Jets. Not awful, but not good. You look at his numbers this year. He took over a team that I think was 3-8 at the time, and went 4-2 down the stretch. Nearly got the Carolina Panthers into the playoffs.
Right.
Totally turned that thing around. There was a point during his starts, he made 6 starts. In the first 5 starts, he had 1 turnover, 1 interception. It wasn't until the last game where he had a couple. I mean, he even had the Panthers leading against Tampa Bay in a winner take the lead kind of thing for the NFC South in Week 17. This is a guy who, I'm not a big fan of Sam Darnold, but he can definitely, I think, come in and run Kyle Shanahan's offense, and it'll be interesting to see, because this is going to be the most talent he's ever played with, and I think the best offensive coach he's ever played with.
By a wide margin, right? When it comes to the amount of talent that he's going to have around him. And you saw what the benefit of having a pairing with Christian McCaffrey can do for any quarterback. And he is reunited with his ex-teammate there. Obviously, at the tail end of the season, did not have him. But in 2022, you saw Sam Darnold stepping up his numbers. He had a leap in productivity. Adjusted net yards per attempt were best for him in 2022 in his career. A significant drop in the interception rates per year. You already talked about the idea that it wasn't until one of the last games of the season wherein he had a multi-interception game. So those improvements show you that, hey, maybe it's not too late to turn the career around for someone who was, again, selected at number 3 overall. Again, going back to that potential. Coaches love potential. And if you throw someone into a new system wherein they're surrounded by an incredible amount of talent, they're not going to have huge expectations. I mean, I believe the expectation for Sam Darnold is to be the 3rd string quarterback. And yet he'll have significant reps early on in camp in OTAs. He'll be able to compete with Trey Lance. It provides the 49ers with a viable option to have someone compete with Trey. So it benefits Sam Darnold in getting ready and having significant snaps in the preseason. And it benefits Trey in having someone push him until you have Brock Purdy back there ready again. And I have to think that in a situation like the Eagles game, you would have been better off with Sam Darnold coming off the bench than Josh Johnson. I mean, it to me, again, the talent that you have there warranted the 3rd overall pick. Can you coax it out of him? That's the unknown. And I will say that the one piece to Darnold that if he were in any way competing to be a legitimate starter on this team, the criticism I would have that's most relevant is kind of melting under pressure, right? I mean, you've heard it. Obviously, the most viral communication by Darnold was around seeing ghosts. And that's unfortunate. You don't want to have something like that get out, because then it just never dies. And you see it all over Twitter today. I think I see some folks in the chat, that have referenced a little bit of that as well. And so that's unfortunate. And it coincides a little with some of the sharp criticism of Coach Shanahan in big moments. So I wouldn't love the pairing of Shanahan and Darnold in a critical moment in the 4th quarter of a Super Bowl. But thankfully, that is not what Sam Darnold is being brought in to do, right? Sam Darnold is being brought in to be the 3rd string. Steve Wilks obviously got a close look at him in Carolina. You have to think he stood on the table talking about his character, talking about what he brings to the table as a competitor and as a human being. Seems like a good person overall, obviously has the talent, and again, is competing for the 3rd string spot. I think it's a great signing.
Yeah, it's an interesting signing, in that now the 49ers have 3 quarterbacks in the room. They have a very young quarterback room. Darnold's only 25, so he's going to turn 26. They have 3 quarterbacks at 26 and under. The other thing that's interesting about that I don't know if anybody's talked about yet today is this now is the 2nd quarterback that went in the top 10 of the 2018 draft that the 49ers have had on their roster. They had Josh Rosen, who was the number 10 quarterback taken, another Southern California kid that was taken in 2018 at the 10th spot. We saw how that played out, right? Another guy, but Darnold, we'll see what he can bring. He's still been able to kind of hang around the NFL, unlike at a decent level, unlike what Rosen's been able to do. I think there's Darnold's had more of an opportunity to play, and when he has at times, like this last season, he performed admirably, I thought, for Carolina down the stretch. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see how this whole thing plays out. I do agree with you that for sure here, the 49ers improved their quarterback room. It is better than it was at the end of last season. That's for sure. I don't mean the end of last season just in the way that the NFC Championship game played out, but you look at the team last year, it started off with Nate Sudfeld as one of your top guys. Garoppolo comes back. I think right now the way that this room is setting up, it's good. And this isn't the end. The Flyers are going to add another guy here. They're going to probably draft a quarterback, I would assume. I don't see them going into OTAs and training camp with just two quarterbacks that can throw the ball.
Right. You have to have that third camp arm at a minimum.
Yeah. So we'll see how that all plays out real quick. This goes back to the comment on, or the topic on Javon Hargrave, Raphael 5629ers. He's a member of the Toolbox. I want to make sure that's one of the benefits. You're a member of the Toolbox. You ask questions, you get them answered. He wants to know which contracts are getting restructured. The Flyers are going to have to move money around. They don't have space right now to sign Hargrave. It doesn't matter. It doesn't become official until 1:00 on Wednesday. So there's some time there to get that worked out. I would just throw a couple names out. I put together a list of 6 that an article from earlier on in the month of February on the Press Democrat. Christian McCaffrey, he's the easy one. He has no bonus money on his contract. He's going to cost them $12 million a year. They can save a bunch of money there. So you have Christian McCaffrey as one. Travarius Ward is another. He didn't make my list because I screwed up and I only kept it to 5, but he would be my 6. So Travarius Ward, you can save a bunch of money with Travarius Ward. You have George Kittle that you can go to. Trent Williams is another one. Eric Armstead as well. So there's 6 guys that the Flyers can go to. If they wanted to maximize the cap space for this season, they could actually free up as much as $60 million in cap space.
That's insane. When you start to realize how much you can manipulate the cap, that the rules are very real. When people say, "Oh, the cap isn't real," that's just patently false. Like it's simply a set of rules, and within those sets of rules, you can do whatever it is you want. And if you have cash available, which Jed York does, and you're willing to convert some of that future salary into immediate signing bonus, players generally don't turn down the opportunity to take in significant lump sums of cash up front, right? If you're going to offer me $50 million, I'm going to take it. And if you are Jed York and you have that money available, you can often kick the can down the road, but you watch with the Rams. Like eventually the bill comes due at some point. And so it looks like the 49ers could make more moves. They could. And I think they're being cautiously prudent while also being aggressive. And I love it.
Yeah, I think so too. And real quick, we have a couple of comments over here that I want to pull up. This one, see, the Toolbox members are smart. They're good guys, and I got actually Luke Walsh hit this too, and then Lucas came on. So this must have just broke on the Twitter machine. But according to Luke and Lucas, I'm pulling up Lucas just because he's a member of the Toolbox. But he says the cap hits for the Hargrave deal are out: $6.6 million in 2023, $15.5 million in 2024. So that's a good deal. Really quick. Also, I want to pull up Luke's. He says it's 4 years, 84, $40 million guaranteed, $23 million signing bonus. 2026 is an option year. 2027, 2028 are void years. So that would mean that the 49ers are spreading this out, putting some dead cap money into 2027, 2028. So his salary cap hits are going to be lower than the 21 million, obviously. Now, real quick, before we move on, this doesn't have anything to do with anything the 49ers did today, but it just happens. This is one of the fun things for me when I look at the way that people react to tweets about player deals. A guy that I thought the 49ers should go out and sign was Jesse Bates, 26 years old, young safety. He got a 4-year, $64 million deal with the Atlanta Falcons, which just happens to be right at the number that was kind of projected for him, $16 million a year. There was a tweet about how Jesse Bates was going to get $23 million in the first year of that contract. And then blah, blah, blah. And there's people who are saying, there's no way the 49ers were going to touch that. No way. No wonder. No way. Well, guess what? Guess how much money they're giving Javon Hargrave in year 1 of this contract? $23 million plus whatever his base is to get him to the cap hit of $6.6 million. So, that's how you play the game. It's going to be about $24 million is going to be how much money Javon Hargrave is going to take home in year 1 of this contract.
Yeah, it's creative, right? Those voidable years have nothing to do with time that player will actually be on the team. They are quite literally ghost years that get added on to the back end of contracts to amortize the initial lump sum money that they're given up front over that additional time. It just allows you to put dead money on future years where you say either this is beyond the meat of our Super Bowl window, or we expect the cap to go up X% and we'll be able to absorb it then. Again, the 49ers have the cash to be able to do that. It's a very astute move, and it allows them to be creative with who they bring in and how much money they spend.
Yeah, I would, when I'm just looking at the numbers really quick and without that Luke has here, remember this was 40 million guaranteed at signing. So of that guaranteed at signing, I would bet, without seeing the numbers all broken down, like on over the cap or what have you, 23 million, the signing bonus is guaranteed. His year one salary is guaranteed, and probably his year two salary is guaranteed. And then from there, there's no more guaranteed money. So when you look at this Javon Hargrave contract, it's going to be very interesting to see how the numbers all play out. But I would say that all that guaranteed money is coming in years 1 and 2.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the fully guaranteed money, right? The stuff that is guaranteed no matter what.
Yeah, so it's good for the 49ers. Again, we talked about it in the beginning. I know, I gave you a couple of reasons. I do think that they're making up for a mistake that they did there. I do think it could have something to do with the quarterback position. We'll see how it all plays out. But it's a great deal for the 49ers in that it's a player that they need. And they weren't done there. They also made another move when it came to defensive line today, re-signing Kevin Givens. Now, Givens was a restricted free agent. 49ers do a really good job of keeping restricted free agents in-house without going. But they also do a really good job of re-signing the restricted free agents without using the tenders. You can use, there's various levels of tender that you give the player, and then another team can come and match it. But they do a good job of re-signing him. From the reports that I saw, Kevin Givens, 1 year, $2.1 million. What are your thoughts on this one?
I love it. I mean, it felt like a foregone conclusion given the number of defensive linemen that were free agents for the 49ers, that when you have that restricted free agent and it's a player that you covet, as I believe Kevin Givens is for the San Francisco 49ers, then it's fairly easy to bring them back. And I agree with you that it's great not to actually have to tender the player to be able to get the deal done on time, ahead of schedule. To me, that speaks to an organization that is treating their players well, a player that probably wanted to return to an organization wherein they believe they can be successful. And I think Kevin Givens is a phenomenal fit within this scheme. I'm excited to see what he can do in this last year of this 1 year of this new contract. See if he can't find himself a more permanent home with the 49ers, because I just love his first step, and he seems like a phenomenal rotation player for the 49ers.
I agree. This is a guy who I don't think people really realize how good he is. And, he's obviously, you look at the money he's given, he's not a Javon Hargrave and he's not a Eric Armstead, but this is a really solid rotational piece that probably is never going to be a full-time starter in the NFL, but this is a guy who, you go back to 2020, Javon Kinlaw's original first year with the 49ers, and they're trying to get him rolling. Kevin Givens ended up taking his job away from him and getting more snaps as that season went along. You look at what Kevin Givens did this past season, he was tied for second in the 49ers with tackles for loss with 7. You talked earlier about the total pressure number for Javon Hargrave at 66 and where the other 49ers were. Kevin Givens had 15 total pressures on far less snaps. He's a very solid rotational piece. I'm looking forward to seeing if he can have a big year and kind of keep that up this season.
Yeah, especially not to get ahead of us. I know we'll go through the losses and we can speak to that individual there, but obviously there was another defensive tackle that did sign with another team out there, the Houston Texans, that we'll talk about, for about double what we ended up bringing back Kevin Givens. So again, that core rotational piece, the Niners needed that depth. Feels like a great signing, one that was expected, but again, good to have him back in-house.
Yeah, this is a really nice signing for the 49ers. You always like to keep your own. And then, this one broke last night. Tayshaun Gibson. I think this is one that a lot of people were hoping for. I think Gibson came in. He led the 49ers in interceptions last year. Wasn't on anybody's radar, at least outside of the organization at this point, because he didn't even get signed until midway through training camp. I believe that he had his workout with the 49ers during the time that they were in Minnesota during training camp even. That's how late in the process he joined. He gets a 1-year, $2.9 million deal. Let me ask you your thoughts, and I'll give you mine.
Yeah, I mean, just a hair over what I thought he'd come back in when we first started talking about free agency. I thought he'd be in that $2.5 million a year range. But then there was, hey, flirting with retirement. So this, again, feels like a good, solid move by the 49ers that speaks to the way in which they do business, the way in which players view them as an organization, that you have one viewing potentially walking away from the game. And hey, I had a resurgent year with the 49ers. This defense is set to be legit again. This team is set to be legit again. I'd like to be a part of it going forward. And so you see a reasonable contract that sets the floor for the safety position. I'm not entirely convinced that Tayshaun Gibson can recreate the type of success that he had last year. I think some of those things fell in the right way such that it was a phenomenal year, but it sets the floor of what you can expect from the safety tandem. It provides continuity in the secondary, and it allows you to now, with maybe one of those third-round picks that you have, take a swing at a higher upside young safety in the draft and allow for some competition. Allow that safety to potentially be the backup, potentially be a special teams contributor this year while learning behind Tayshaun Gibson, who certainly was fundamentally sound within the defense. And if you're going to have someone learning from a vet above them, I'll take fundamentally sound over athletically gifted 7 days of the week, because that is teachable, right? That is something that can be passed on to the next generation. So I won't be surprised if we have competition at that safety spot, but I feel secure in knowing Tayshaun Gibson can hold it down.
Yeah, and you just hit on all the reasons I think it's a good deal. It's a low risk deal in terms that it's not expensive. It brings back a guy who works well. We know that he works well with Talon Hufanga on the back end of this defense. That's a positive. He's a ball hawk. The two of them, like I said, he already said he led the 49ers in interceptions with 5. Probably could have had more if he didn't drop a couple. And you know what? Between the 5 that Gibson had last year and the 4 that Hufanga had, that's 9, and that's, I think, the highest number since 2014 or 13 with the 49ers. It's been a long time since they've had safeties that make plays the way that Gibson and Hufanga have. And again, it's a low deal, 1 year. It allows you to have a veteran in place. And what I like about it, and what I like about the way the 49ers usually do business, is they fill all their holes during this period. Tayshaun Gibson, in this case, is a hole filler. He's going to be able to start. And now you draft and that draft pick is the guy that's going to take you for the future. You can bring him on. You don't necessarily have to have him play a lot. If he's good enough, he can play. You can find roles for him, like what they did with Hufanga in 2021. I think this is a really nice signing by the 49ers.
Yeah, just another example of fundamentally sound roster building, to your point of fill the hole and then layer on top of it through the draft, such that you're not forced into drafting for need.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next one too. And this, I think, is another example of that, is Colton McKivitz. This one was done last week, so it's not necessarily breaking news, but the 49ers bringing him back on a cheaper deal. The get him back 2 years, I think it's like $5.9 million, something like that, over the next couple of years. The expectation is that he's going to be able to contribute across the line of scrimmage and maybe even start at right tackle for the 49ers.
This absolutely fits that mold of, hey, fill the need and potentially address it, add some competition throughout, whether that is another free agent or going at it through the draft. I will say, unlike how I feel about the Tayshaun Gibson move, wherein in that particular situation, I feel like it does set the floor of, I'm okay if this is the best that we can do at the safety position going forward. I would be fine with Tayshaun Gibson starting. I would be fine with Colton McKivitz starting, but less so. The tone in my voice changed right there from I'd be fine to I'm be fine with that. You know, it's not quite as comforting for me if Colton McKivitz is the starting right tackle. I love him as competing for it as our swing tackle. I do think that between the two, if I'm talking about adding a safety or adding another right tackle for competition in both those spots, I'm prioritizing right tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the 49ers here, they get a guy. Again, this is plugging a hole that you're gonna build around. Do I expect Colton McKivitz to be the starter all season long for the 49ers? No, I don't. I mean, he might be the starter there. I think what they're going to do here is they got McKivitz. They're going to look at free agency, see if they can find somebody else that fits that spot. But in free agency, I really think they're going to be spending more of their time looking at the center position, because that's where they have a hole that That's one where they haven't plugged the hole yet. They have Nick Zakel, excuse me. Let me say the name right. Nick Zakel at center. But I don't know if that's really what they're going to do. I don't think they plan on going into the season with that guy. He was a draft pick last year. So I think you're going to see them with McKivitz. You probably see a rookie to compete with him for the starting job. I really like the guy out of BYU there. Forgive me, I don't know all their names right now. I'll be much better at this as we go through. But I had the guy from BYU on my list of targets. I'm just blanking on it because I'm so focused on free agency right now. And McKivitz is a good fit, cheap, good competition. We know that he can block like the Dickens when it comes to the running game. Pass protection's a little bit more of a struggle for him. We'll see how this all plays out. We know that the 49ers can win games with Colton McKivitz. They've done it in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and the strategy is just pass protection. Just go through a few quarterbacks throughout the season. We've got plenty of them now, and so pass protection isn't quite as important.
That's right. Real quick before we move on, I wanted to just throw this up because Lucas says the 49ers are going to draft a safety in the third and try to make him ready for 2024. That's going back to our discussion on Tayshaun Gibson. So Lucas, he's a member of the toolbox. That's why he's on it. He's sharp.
I'm with Lucas on this. I think he is spot on.
I agree with him. I think so too. So those are all the additions the 49ers have made so far. I don't know if they'd be additions or holding on to them. See Jay Alley coming in and he's picking me up. He says it's Freeland. Absolutely. Freeland is the offensive lineman from BYU. He played left tackle for them. Very athletic. He put up really good numbers at the combine when it comes to athleticism. His film looks really good. I think there's a potential that he could be there when the 49ers early, at the end of round 3, they might have to trade up a little bit to get him, but I think he might be the target for him there.
I love it.
Really quick. Eric says, Jack and Rob, do you think there was any consideration to sign Hargrave, not to just improve their own team, but also because it weakens the Eagles, who seem to be their primary competition in the NFC? I don't think that enters their equation all that much. I think they just see a guy that's a really good defensive tackle. I think they know that they need to get more productivity from that spot when it comes to pass rush. And Hargrave also has that ability to play the run defense pretty well as good, also. So I think that's the thought for the 49ers, is that they just need to get the best player available. I don't think they were really even considering the Eagles so much, but that's a really good point because it does weaken one of their primary opponents.
Yeah, it's icing on the cake, right? Certainly they're filling a need, best player available. To have stolen that player from your primary competition in the NFC, wonderful, probably not their driving force.
Yeah, so good stuff on that one. Really good question there, Eric, as well. Let's take a look at a couple of losses. There's a few things that went on. It just wasn't necessarily everybody coming back. We just got done talking about Colton McKivitz. So the guy that he might be replacing, Mike McGlinchey, gets what was his deal? 4 years, $84 million.
Yeah, $17.4 million per year.
Yeah, 5 years, right? It was a 5-year deal, correct?
Correct.
5 years, 83 something was the deal for Mike McGlinchey. Yeah, $17.5 million on average. Not that bad. When you look at it, the projections was it was going to be about 16 to 16 and a half. So they weren't too far off. 17 and a half from Mike McGlinchey to the Denver Broncos. That's a good deal for Denver.
It is. And I think it speaks to a couple of things, because let's be honest, that Mike McGlinchey gets more than his fair share of chiding and hate from 49ers fans, because he does have the occasional very glaring misstep, and those tend to make their rounds on 49ers Twitter. But I do not view the Denver Broncos, even after their weird move with Russell Wilson, as an irresponsible franchise. I think they have, over the course of years, put together quality teams and put together some phenomenal offensive lines. So the idea that they are willing to shell out nearly $17.5 million per year on Mike McGlinchey, I do believe speaks to the quality of player that he is. Yes, it's relative because it's the quality of the player versus the other available assets in free agency, and he was the best option available there. But it, again, speaks to what he was able to provide for the 49ers. The loss that we will have, I have no doubt that it is stepping back. If the 49ers end up starting Colton McKivitz throughout the year, it would be a big step back from Mike McGlinchey. And I also had the Niners probably bowing out at about that $15 million a year range. Clearly, the Broncos were willing to go above that. And there were other teams mentioned as well. So it wasn't as if it was just one team out there pursuing Mike McGlinchey. He was a hot commodity.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, for the 49ers, do you want Mike McGlinchey for another 5 years, or do you think that you need to shore up the interior of your defensive line? And I think that's the difference, right? They felt the need to shore up the interior more than the right tackle spot. They felt that they could get somebody there maybe a little bit more cheap on the down low in terms of the cheap cost there, and so that's the direction that they take. McGlinchey, when you look at when his contract comes out, I bet you his salary cap hit's going to be lower than he played at last year. Last year he was $10.8 million, 10.88. I bet you when all's said and done, he's probably going to be in the $8 million range when that whole thing comes out. We'll see what those numbers look like. So McGlinchey to the Broncos, good for him. Good to see that he got paid. It's good to see that he's over in the AFC, and he's going to get to go up against his good pal Jimmy Garoppolo 2 times a year.
Jimmy G, following a long list of Niners headed to the Raiders.
Hey, here's my, I'm going to give you my take, and then I'll ask you for yours.
Sure.
But, Jimmy Garoppolo gets a 3-year deal, not a big deal, not anywhere close to the kind of contract he signed when he joined the 49ers. There's a lot of reasons behind that. He's not the first quarterback to go from the New England Patriots to the San Francisco 49ers, to the Raiders. It wasn't the Las Vegas Raiders at that point. But, back in the early 80s, there was a guy in the 70s, there was a quarterback who was originally drafted by the Patriots, floundered around there, got traded to the 49ers, didn't really work out for him here. And then he ended up with the Raiders and won 2 Super Bowls in 1980 and 1983. Jim Plunkett. We'll see what happens here with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Hey, I am rooting for Jimmy. I have a warm spot in my heart for what Jimmy did for our franchise. I feel badly the amount of disdain that he garnered throughout the last years of his time with San Francisco. No doubt that the way in which it unfolded, the circumstances were nowhere near ideal. And yet, when I looked at the way in which teammates talked about Jimmy, which to me was the insight of what his character is, what he meant to the organization, and what he truly did and said within that locker room, no one ever faltered in talking about him as a brother, as someone that they respected. And so to me, in watching him go, I wish him nothing but the best with Oakland. And clearly, he had something to prove. He was not a viable, healthy, instant starter, and it's reflected in the contract, wherein there are some incentives that come with he gets a lot more money, and we need to be rooting for him to stay healthy because our compensatory pick will be influenced by some of those roster bonuses that he can accrue if he starts those games.
Yeah, you start to look at it from a compensatory standpoint, and that's right, because the loss of Mike McGlinchey is offset by the signing of Javon Hargrave. But the Garoppolo loss to the Raiders, if he maximizes his contract there, should give the 49ers a 3rd-round comp pick next year, which would put him right back around, I believe, at 2 or 3 3rd-round comp picks in 2024 draft. So there's the positive there. You mentioned wanting to see Jimmy Garoppolo succeed in Las Vegas. I think there's a really good chance that he's going to succeed in Las Vegas. He's going to a system that he knows. He's already played under Josh McDaniel in the past. He's going to be able to throw to Devontae Adams.
Right.
He's going to be able to throw to Darren Waller. The only question there is if Josh Jacobs comes back. I mean, he's going from the 49ers to the Raiders, and I think that it fits perfectly for him. And I think if he can stay healthy and Jacobs is there and they're able to run the ball and do those kind of things, that, this thing really could fit up to where the Raiders are going to. I said watch out on Twitter, and I agree. I think if all those guys are there and Garoppolo is able to do what Garoppolo does, I think the Raiders are going to be a team to watch in 2023.
What would it be like if we had a showdown end of the year Jimmy G against the Niners in the Super Bowl? I mean, that would just be wild. I'm not predicting anything like that, but what if, Jack? The storylines would be gold.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it would be Garoppolo against the Niners in Las Vegas. The place would be crazy. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see that all go down. And the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo out in Vegas too, given his history, is kind of interesting. We'll leave that for another show. But I do want to say this though, really quick. When it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, and I know that there's folks that are in their comment section. I know there's folks on Twitter. There's folks all around that they're not Jimmy Garoppolo fans. They don't believe in Jimmy Garoppolo, what have you, and that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to try to change your opinion of Jimmy Garoppolo. What I'm going to say really quick is, if you're a 49ers fan right now, as Jimmy Garoppolo heads out to Las Vegas, Viva Las Vegas, Jimmy, see you later, see ya, as he said to all of us last year. You need to stop and you need to say thank you to Jimmy Garoppolo. Again, whether you think he's a good quarterback or not, it doesn't matter. Without Jimmy Garoppolo, you don't have Nick Bosa on this team. Without Jimmy Garoppolo, you don't have Deebo Samuel on this team. If you're a Trey Lance, the biggest Trey Lance fan in the world, and you think that Trey Lance is going to be the shit moving forward, pardon my language, you need to thank Jimmy Garoppolo. Because without Jimmy Garoppolo, none of those guys are on the 49ers, because it took Garoppolo getting injured in 2018 for the 49ers to be as bad as they were and be in position to draft Nick Bosa and then Deebo Samuel. And it took Jimmy Garoppolo being injured in 2020 for them to be as bad as they were to be in the position to trade up and select Trey Lance. So real quick, for all the Jimmy Garoppolo folks who don't like him, take a minute, drop all that for just a second and say, thanks, Jimmy.
Hey, it's better to be lucky than good. That is a fact. And yes, it was the luck of the bad luck of Jimmy Garoppolo that did net us those phenomenal players, because we went from fantastic when he was healthy to not so great without a starting quarterback. And that did net us some phenomenal players that allowed for quick turnarounds. And I would argue, even when you look at the despair he pulled us out of in 2018 with those, or 2017 with those final 5 games, I mean, that really was a change in the Shanahan era that I think prior to that, yes, everyone was hyped about bringing Shanahan and Lynch on board. And that losing streak was really something that year. And I think witnessing the unlock of Jimmy coming in and seeing what could be done if you had quality quarterback play gave a lot of hope to the franchise. It inspired players, certainly inspired me as a fan. And so I am thankful for Jimmy Garoppolo. I thought he did give a lot of heart while he was here. There were some very painful moments as well, a lot of frustrating moments, but much like with almost every player when they leave the Niners, save for maybe Dion in 95, but I've gotten over that. I wish Jimmy nothing but the best in going on.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And the fact that he's in Vegas, just right there, and the Raiders are on TV a lot of times in this area, not as much as they used to be. Right. And we'll see him play a little bit here and there. It's not going to be like when Joe went to, not going to be anywhere close to when Joe went to Kansas City, right? But it's going to be fun to still kind of keep an eye on him and see how he does and see how that whole thing, works out.
Plus, we get to see everyone who compares Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo. Now we actually get to see within the same system. Like, you will have an actual apples to apples comparison to say which one is better.
There you go. Or real quick, or what will happen is like what you I've noticed this around 49ers Twitter. They'll tell you that it doesn't matter because player X or player Y, it all depends on which player you like better. If you like Trey Lance, you're going to say, well, Trey Lance isn't getting the same hand that Jimmy Garoppolo had. Look, they don't have Mike McGlinchey anymore.
Right.
So it's always fun, that kind of stuff.
Yes, it is.
I do have to hit the super chat really quick from Kevin. He says, well said, Jack. Trey Lance is my guy, but Jimmy Garoppolo served well. Hey, and he did. With Jimmy Garoppolo there, they made a Super Bowl. They made an NFC Championship game. He kept them afloat in the middle of this season, right after Trey Lance went down early on in the season. And he left the 49ers. The main thing here with Jimmy Garoppolo is he's leaving the 49ers in a better spot than when he joined them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with Kevin. Well said, Jack. I thought that was a great call out.
So we'll see where this goes. I'm looking forward to the rest of this process, for free agency. We're going to see a lot of restructuring. We talked about it earlier in terms of what's going to happen. I think that we're going to see a lot of that now tonight and tomorrow and early in the day on Wednesday, as far as news on contracts being restructured for the 49ers to make that room for Hargrave. It's only $6 million. So it's not like it's going to be major restructuring to fit him in this year. So we'll see how it works out, but they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very exciting. There's still some holes left to be filled. If asking this, if I'm giving you these as the biggest holes remaining, and you could dispute that, hey, there's one that places above these, but I'm going to give you my top 5, and I want to hear what you think is the biggest remaining hole for the Niners. Center, nickel, right tackle, kicker, or edge, in no particular order. Those were not stack ranked as far as I believe them. But if I say those are the top 5 needs, which one do they need to address most fervently?
They need to address center. They don't have a center right now. I mean,
We're locked in on that.
Nick Sakal's I have nothing against Nick Sakal, but he was a late round draft pick last year. Never played center. He practiced center quite a bit, but he never actually played the position in a game, as far as I know. So I think this is your biggest need. You've got guys at all these other spots that can plug the holes, but I would say you start there. And hey, who knows? Maybe Jimmy Ward comes back. Maybe Jimmy Ward gets signed to become your high priced nickel corner. That'd be a great signing for the 49ers as well.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those could be filled by your own guys. Brendel, that one looks tough. I'm in lockstep with you that center's the biggest need, and Brendel is getting interest. I've seen links to the Texans, Bears, Giants, Browns, and Jets. Obviously, with the Texans and the Jets, you see the obvious connection in offensive systems. The 49ers obviously have interest there as well, but with that many players at the table, I'm just not convinced that the Niners will be able to get that deal done.
Yeah, we'll see the direction that it goes. I would like to see them. I'd actually like Jake Brendel, but if they can find the guy that I wanted to see them maybe get in free agency, ended up signing with re-signing with the Carolina Panthers, just because he's a little bit better of a run blocker than Brendel. I think Brendel as a pass protector is very underrated. Brendel as a run blocker, that's where he struggles. It'll be interesting to see what they do here.
Absolutely. A few players that could come back. Hey, you never know. Robbie Gould might get less interest. I trust Matt Barrows when he says that, hey, it's not solidified that he's completely gone. So you could see a few guys coming back, but a lot of things to tune into for the rest of free agency.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys are doing me a favor. Keep it here locked into Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer. You notice there's a little bit of change here. You should be the Jack Hammer Show, all that kind of stuff. Want to make sure that it's Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer. You can still find me on here on YouTube anyway if you're not already subscribed to the channel. But why not subscribe? It's easy. Just click the little button, the little bell. You click that, you don't miss any of the news. Rob's got his own channel here on YouTube if you don't already know that. But Rob, what do you got coming up?
I do. I have a show coming up on Wednesday. We have got Randon and I between two beards, and then hopefully you and I will get on the program on my channel later on this week as well. We'll have more free agency moves to track down at that point. Yes, I agree. Like and subscribe to both channels because it's phenomenal 49ers content. And if you're not there reading Jack's stories at the Press Democrat, which is right there below me in the graphic, you should be. Bookmark that thing.
Yeah, you should. There's all kinds of stuff. I wrote 2 articles a day plus a live blog. I was writing way too much for me. My hands are, I need to go put them in some ice and chill out a little bit.
Carpal tunnel happening for Jack.
Especially for us old guys, but also like Rob said, he's got Between Two Beards coming up on Wednesday. Make sure you check it out. I listen to it all the time. These guys, they're funny, they're smart. It's a fun show. Rob's channel is good. He puts out a lot of good content. So make sure you get over there, and it's easy to find him. Just type his name into the search bar on YouTube, and voila! Make sure you subscribe to his channel. And then, like Rob said, before you leave this one, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification. The biggest thing you can do for both of us, though, is hit the like buttons on our show. The more likes these shows get, the more they get pushed out to everybody across the YouTube stratosphere, and that helps our views out. And the views are what we really do the most for us. So if you like what you're seeing, hit the subscribe button, but more importantly, hit that like button and keep it locked in here, though. Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer, we're going to be bringing you all the 49ers breaking news as it happens, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Rob, thank you for taking the time to meet with me tonight again. And for everybody else, thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your Tuesday night. Take care, and we'll be talking to you soon. Rob going to say cheers?
Cheers.